Have you ever looked back at an old relationship and asked yourself, back then, was I truly in love with that person? Or was I just trying to love a fantasy in my mind? All of us have loved before, and sometimes we've loved deeply and sincerely, but the danger lies in this. The person you fell for may not have truly existed, at least not in the way you imagined. Some people enter your life like a refreshing breeze, making you believe it's destiny, but later, you realize you are in love with an image, a performance, not with someone who truly knows how to love or live with responsibility. There are women who are charming, graceful, and intellectually sharp, the kind that make you believe you found your soulmate. But the longer you stay, the more exhausted you become. Everything starts to feel like a recurring play, sometimes overwhelmingly passionate, other times cold as ice. One day she loves you for your strength, the next, she criticizes you for not being sensitive enough. You try to adjust, to please, to understand, until one day, you burn out. You can't quite explain why something so beautiful has left you feeling so mentally drained. But if you've ever paused long enough to listen to the silence within, you may have heard the very first whisper. Something isn't right here, not because of who you are, but because of how you're treating yourself. This isn't a monologue about blaming women, nor is it a checklist meant to criticize or condemn. This is a conversation for the men mature enough to ask themselves, am I loving the right kind of person? From the lens of modern psychoanalysis, relationships that confuse you or drain your energy usually don't stem from a lack of love, but from a lack of inner clarity. You're searching for validation, gentleness, care, but you're looking in the wrong place. You're asking for these things from someone who cannot give them to you. Worse, you are sacrificing your own well-being just to be loved, in the way she defines it, not realizing that love should never be an exchange of endurance. Love should never make you feel small. In today's world, we encounter many women who appear emotionally mature, yet are psychologically wounded. They manipulate with sweetness, demand with silence, and keep you around through guilt. They make you doubt yourself, but still convince you it's love. And you accept it because you think, maybe this is just what modern love looks like. But if you don't wake up in time, you'll pay the price with your emotional freedom, your mental health, and worse, with years of your life. That's why this video, or more accurately, this journey, is for you. We'll walk through 7 clear signs of a woman who is not aligned with a conscious life. Round pushpin: she values appearance over character. Round pushpin: she avoids personal responsibility. Round pushpin: she's overly dependent on other people's opinions. Round pushpin: she's emotionally unstable and prone to extremes. Round pushpin: she chases materialism and is driven by greed. Round pushpin: she avoids introspection and lacks self-reflection. Round pushpin: she talks more than she listens. And finally, one additional trait, subtle, but no less significant. Round pushpin: she constantly makes you wait, a behavior that seems small but gradually takes control over your rhythm of life. If you're walking a conscious path, if you've chosen a life of depth over noise, it's time to learn how to choose your partner mindfully. Light bulb: true love does not leave you exhausted. Light bulb: a real companion will not cast you into a role. Light bulb: and a woman who is truly worthy will never make you sacrifice your own identity just to keep the relationship alive. Because love, in its purest form, is not something you survive. It's something that helps you thrive. 1. She prioritizes appearance over character. Imagine walking into a party. There's a woman who draws every eye in the room. Flawless skin, impeccably styled outfit, confident and magnetic presence. On social media, she leads the trends. Every photo radiates perfection, every angle calculated to highlight her beauty. But if you stay a little longer, talk a little deeper, you may uncover a truth that makes you pause. She's so focused on the outside, she's forgotten the world within. According to Stoic philosophy, this is one of the clearest signs of foolishness, not because caring for your appearance is wrong, but because relying on it to define your self-worth is a dangerous choice. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." True beauty, then, doesn't live in cosmetics or designer clothes, it lives in the mind, in the character, and in the values you cultivate daily. A woman who places appearance above character not only limits herself but also falls into an invisible psychological trap. She becomes someone who lives for the gaze and opinions of others. Every photo she posts, every word she says, becomes a performance. If today's post gets fewer likes, if someone critiques her new hairstyle, her peace of mind unravels. To build your worth on the validation of others is to build a house on sand. Faces age, bodies change, trends fade, and when they do, what remains? Emptiness, fear, confusion, because she no longer knows who she is without the spotlight. No one says caring for yourself is bad. On the contrary, being well kept reflects self-respect. But the danger begins when appearance becomes the center, when you spend hours choosing outfits but not even 10 minutes asking, am I living true to my values? She might know exactly which lipstick flatters her skin tone, but not what makes a person kind. She might spend all night editing photos, but can't spend one quiet minute listening to someone in pain. She wants attention, but doesn't know how to earn respect. A wise woman, from a stoic point of view, knows that true beauty begins within, in how she behaves when no one's watching, in the kindness that expects no recognition, in the quiet discipline of small daily choices, in the unshakable knowledge of who she is, and the freedom from having to prove it. Ask yourself, if one day you no longer look the way you do, would you still feel valuable? If no one complimented you, would you still feel worthy of love? If social media disappeared and there were no more cameras, what would be left of you? The truth is, a woman may turn heads with her looks, but what makes people stay is depth, is intellect, is compassion, is integrity, is the strength to remain grounded when everything around her collapses. Seneca once said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more. That is poor." This applies not just to material wealth, but to attention. If your sense of self relies on admiration, that's not confidence, that's dependency, and dependency can never be the foundation of a peaceful life. So if you realize that you've once, or are now, living too much on the surface, don't panic. Awakening always begins with a moment of recognition. Shift gently, invest in your mind, build your character, choose to read a book instead of scrolling. Spend time listening instead of thinking only about your best angle for the day. Beauty may open the door, but what makes someone walk in and stay is your truth. And you deserve to be someone who is not only beautiful in others' eyes, but someone you're proud to be when no one is watching. You don't have to give up fashion. You don't have to stop caring for yourself. Just remember, don't let others' eyes be the only mirror of your worth. You are not the image you post. You are the choices you make, especially the ones no one sees. 2. She avoids personal responsibility. Deep down in every human being lies a truth that is difficult to accept. Your life is your own responsibility. Not your parents, not your boss, not your partner, but you. Yet, there are people, especially the cleverly manipulative kind, who always find ways to shift blame beyond themselves. They are always the victim in their own story. When work stagnates, it's because of a toxic environment. When love fails, it's because the other person was harmful. When life feels dull, it's society's fault. They construct a world in which they are always the one who suffers. And all difficulties are someone else's fault. This might sound reasonable until you realize they have never actually taken the initiative to change anything. Stoic philosophy teaches, no one can harm you unless you allow it. Personal responsibility isn't about shouldering everything. It's about having the courage to face your own role in each situation. When a woman constantly shifts blame, it's not because she's naive, it's because she lacks the courage to confront her part in what's happening. The woman who avoids responsibility often lives in a state of waiting. She waits for opportunities, waits for others to change, waits for better circumstances, but she forgets this. No one is coming to rescue her. Every time she refuses responsibility, she also refuses the right to change her life, and that is the greatest loss. I once knew a woman who was very smart and capable. She often talked about big dreams, about her desire to transform herself, but year after year, she remained in the same place. When asked why, she spoke of a difficult boss, jealous colleagues, an unsupportive family. Everything, except herself, was the reason. And when gently advised to perhaps start with herself, she went silent, then avoided, then returned to the safe zone of complaining. A woman like that is not to be blamed, but pitied, because she is missing out on the chance to take ownership of her own life. Personal responsibility isn't always comfortable. It requires you to be honest, sometimes painfully so, when you realize that you might be the problem. But it is from that very pain that growth is born. If you keep living in a cycle of blame, you will always be stuck. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. If you cannot control circumstances, start with how you respond to them. A woman who can say, "I was wrong, I will change," is someone who is truly walking the path of growth. In love, the person who avoids responsibility is the one who makes the relationship exhausting. She demands you change, but never changes herself. She wants to be heard, but won't listen back. She uses emotion as a tool to avoid growth. And the saddest part, she doesn't even realize it. You may love a woman like that, but you cannot grow with her, because to journey far together, both must share the weight of responsibility. If only one person carries it while the other only complains, that's not love. That's a prolonged sentence. So what if you are the one avoiding responsibility? Don't beat yourself up. Just start by asking, "What's my part in this?" The answer may not be easy to hear, but it will be the beginning of all change. And if you're in love with someone like this, ask yourself, am I helping her grow or enabling her stagnation? The answer will show you whether to continue or to walk away. In the Stoic worldview, personal responsibility is not just a virtue, it is the foundation of freedom. A woman who owns her part, who dares to change, who learns from her mistakes, is worthy of respect, not because she is perfect, but because she is honest. And in a world full of finger-pointing, the one who dares to say, "It's my fault," is the one who truly stands apart. Free. She is overly dependent on others' opinions. There's a kind of woman you will encounter often in life, the kind who doesn't lie by her inner voice, but by how she's seen from the outside. She smiles when praised, frowns when criticized, and every decision she makes, big or small, is filtered through the lens of, "What will people think?" At first glance, she may seem agreeable and easy to be around because she always tries to please everyone. But the more time you spend with her, the more you'll notice a quiet emptiness because she doesn't truly know who she is. She's too busy adjusting herself to fit other people's standards, and in doing so, she loses her own essence. Stoic philosophy doesn't oppose living in harmony with society, but it clearly warns, he who lives by praise will die by criticism. When you place your self-worth in the hands of others, you're giving away your greatest freedom, the right to live true to who you are. A woman like this will always live in a state of unease. One day, someone says she's beautiful, she's happy. The next day, someone says she lacks grace, her whole world collapses. She doesn't need enemies, just a single negative comment is enough to send her into turmoil. Her dependence on other people's judgment keeps her emotions unstable, which directly affects every relationship around her. I once knew a woman like that. She was excellent at socializing, always knew how to show up just right, in the right way, but when faced with personal decisions, like choosing a career, a partner, or a lifestyle, she always turned to others and asked, "What do people think? Is this weird? Has anyone done this before?" She couldn't decide for herself, not because she lacked intelligence, but because she lacked self-trust. In the end, she lived a life that looked perfect to others, but felt exhausting to herself. A wise woman listens to opinions, but is not controlled by them. She's open to feedback, thoughtful about suggestions, but she always double-checks with a question, does this truly align with my values? She's not afraid of being misunderstood, because she understands herself. She doesn't need others to affirm her worth, she already has inner agreement. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Don't concern yourself with what others think. Focus instead on whether you are living in accordance with reason." In today's noisy world, living authentically is an act of courage, and a woman, if she doesn't develop inner independence, will easily spiral into the trap of seeking approval. You can recognize a woman who's overly dependent on others through small behaviors. She frequently asks for opinions, changes her stance depending on the crowd, deletes social media posts when they get low engagement, or feels hurt by even the most benign comments. She's always chasing likes, not just online, but in real life, and the more she chases them, the more inadequate she feels. This dependency not only drains her, but also exhausts her loved ones, because you'll always be expected to reassure her, to agree, to constantly encourage her, And if one day you say the wrong thing, her reaction will be disproportionately intense because your words aren't just feedback, they're perceived as her value itself. So what's the solution? It's learning to master one's inner world. It's developing the ability to self-validate rather than needing external affirmation. It's asking, if no one knew about this, would I still do it? The answer to that question will show you whether you're living truthfully or just performing. Seneca said, if you live according to what others expect, you will die filled with regret. And that has never been more true. A wise woman doesn't try to please everyone. She chooses to live rightly and allows those who matter to find their way to that truth. The world doesn't need more women who are trendy, likable, or crowd-pleasing. The world needs women who are aligned with virtue, with the honest, undiluted essence of who they truly are. 4. She lacks emotional stability and is easily ruled by impulses. Imagine you're having a peaceful evening. You and your partner are enjoying dinner together, with no apparent conflict, but with just one comment from you, even if it's unintentional. Even if it's gentle, the night can suddenly turn into an emotional battlefield. Tears roll down, silence thickens the air, or worse, there's an explosion of anger. This scenario won't seem unfamiliar if you've ever been with a woman who lacks emotional stability. Stoic philosophy once emphasized, the strongest person is the one who masters themselves. But what happens when a woman fails to master herself and allows fleeting emotions to dictate her behavior? In that case, reason is clouded, and the relationship becomes a place that bears the brunt of the fallout. She might be in a cheerful mood, but one small trigger, an unanswered message, a harmless comment, can cause her emotional state to flip instantly. Not because the incident is serious, but because her emotional foundation is fragile. Her emotions are like massive waves, always ready to swallow everything in their path. A woman who lacks emotional stability often reacts from instinct rather than thought. She is easily hurt but uses that hurt to control others through sulking, tears, prolonged silence, or cutting words. This not only exhausts her, but also traps those around her in a passive role, never sure where the limits are or when the next storm will hit. A friend once told me that whenever he tried to speak his truth, even gently, his girlfriend would overreact. She didn't listen, didn't reflect, only blamed, acted devastated, and made him feel guilty. Over time, he chose silence, not because he was wrong, but because he feared her emotions. But silence is not a solution. Prolonged silence kills connection. And one day, they quietly drifted apart, not because they didn't love each other, but because they were too tired to keep loving. Stoicism does not teach us to suppress emotions. On the contrary, it teaches us to observe them. Emotions are not bad. They're a natural part of being human. But impulsive, unregulated reactions driven by emotion, that is a sign of a lack of inner maturity. Seneca once wrote, "Anger is a temporary madness. If you love someone who constantly lets emotions steer their actions, sooner or later, you will pay the price, not in loud arguments, but in the slow erosion of spirit, trust, and the sense of safety within the relationship." So what are the most obvious signs of someone who lacks emotional stability? It's their inability to stay calm in conversation. They jump to conclusions, derail the topic, dig up the past to hurt the present, and instead of seeking solutions, they choose avoidance through silence, hurtful words, or psychological pressure. A wise woman learns to observe her emotions instead of being dragged by them. She knows when to speak and when to wait. She pauses to breathe, to understand, before she reacts. She understands that emotions should not be denied, but they also shouldn't be in the driver's seat. She chooses to act from reason, not impulse. Practicing this is not easy. It requires awareness. Each time anger flares, each time tears threaten to fall, each time fear casts its shadow on the heart, she asks herself, is this reaction helping me? Or am I just running from the truth? That's the question a woman who follows a deep, intentional philosophy of life constantly poses to herself. A woman can be beautiful, talented, and captivating, but if she lets emotions control everything, sooner or later she will push herself away from meaningful relationships. Because no one can survive forever in an emotionally pressurized environment without burning out. On the other hand, a woman who masters her emotions, she becomes a place of refuge. Her composure is a lighthouse in the storm, and that is the most enduring kind of allure, not her gaze. her figure, or her words, but an unwavering inner calm in the face of life's turbulence. 4. She lacks emotional stability and is easily ruled by impulses. Imagine you're having a peaceful evening. You and your partner are enjoying dinner together, with no apparent conflict, but with just one comment from you, even if it's unintentional. Even if it's gentle, the night can suddenly turn into an emotional battlefield. Tears roll down, silence thickens the air, or worse, there's an explosion of anger. This scenario won't seem unfamiliar if you've ever been with a woman who lacks emotional stability. Stoic philosophy once emphasized, the strongest person is the one who masters themselves. But what happens when a woman fails to master herself and allows fleeting emotions to dictate her behavior? In that case, reason is clouded, and the relationship becomes a place that bears the brunt of the fallout. She might be in a cheerful mood, but one small trigger, an unanswered message, a harmless comment, can cause her emotional state to flip instantly. Not because the incident is serious, but because her emotional foundation is fragile. Her emotions are like massive waves, always ready to swallow everything in their path. A woman who lacks emotional stability often reacts from instinct rather than thought. She is easily hurt but uses that hurt to control others through sulking, tears, prolonged silence, or cutting words. This not only exhausts her, but also traps those around her in a passive role, never sure where the limits are, or when the next storm will hit. A friend once told me that whenever he tried to speak his truth, even gently, his girlfriend would overreact. She didn't listen, didn't reflect, only blamed, acted devastated, and made him feel guilty. Over time, he chose silence, not because he was wrong, but because he feared her emotions. But silence is not a solution. Prolonged silence kills connection. And one day, they quietly drifted apart, not because they didn't love each other, but because they were too tired to keep loving. Stoicism does not teach us to suppress emotions. On the contrary, it teaches us to observe them. Emotions are not bad, they are a natural part of being human. But impulsive, unregulated reactions driven by emotion, that is a sign of a lack of inner maturity. Seneca once wrote, "Anger is a temporary madness. If you love someone who constantly lets emotions steer their actions, sooner or later, you will pay the price, not in loud arguments, but in the slow erosion of spirit, trust, and the sense of safety within the relationship." So what are the most obvious signs of someone who lacks emotional stability? It's their inability to stay calm in conversation. They jump to conclusions, derail the topic, dig up the past to hurt the present, and instead of seeking solutions, they choose avoidance through silence, hurtful words, or psychological pressure. A wise woman learns to observe her emotions instead of being dragged by them. She knows when to speak and when to wait. She pauses to breathe, to understand, before she reacts. She understands that emotions should not be denied, but they also shouldn't be in the driver's seat. She chooses to act from reason, not impulse. Practicing this is not easy. It requires awareness. Each time anger flares, each time tears threaten to fall, each time fear casts its shadow on the heart, she asks herself, is this reaction helping me? Or am I just running from the truth? That's the question a woman who follows a deep, intentional philosophy of life constantly poses to herself. A woman can be beautiful, talented, and captivating, but if she lets emotions control everything, sooner or later she will push herself away from meaningful relationships. Because no one can survive forever in an emotionally pressurized environment without burning out. On the other hand, a woman who masters her emotions, she becomes a place of refuge. Her composure is a lighthouse in the storm, and that is the most enduring kind of allure, not her gaze, her figure, or her words, but an unwavering inner calm in the face of life's turbulence. 6. She avoids inner reflection and lacks the ability for self-examination. There is a certain type of woman you'll encounter often in today's world, someone who is constantly busy, outwardly energetic, talkative, and seemingly full of life. But when you sit down with her, talk slowly, deeply, you begin to notice a hollow space within, one that even she avoids confronting. This is the woman who evades inner reflection, and according to Stoic philosophy, it is one of the clearest signs of a lack of wisdom. She fears silence. She fears being alone. She fears having to listen to herself, because in that quiet, She'll be faced with questions she has no answers to. Who am I? What am I really living for? Why do I feel exhausted even though everything looks fine on the surface? These are not comfortable questions. They force a person to look at their unpolished parts, their unhealed wounds, and mistakes they've yet to admit. But it's that very avoidance that keeps people stuck. When you don't look within, you'll live on the surface, reacting instead of choosing, conforming instead of deciding, running instead of resolving. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "An unexamined life is not worth living." He did not say this to judge, but to remind us that self-awareness is the starting point of all deep transformation. No true change can begin if you are unwilling to face yourself. A woman who lacks self-reflection is often heavily influenced by her surroundings. She might change her opinions just because her friends do. She may miss important opportunities because she doesn't truly understand what's meaningful to her. She may constantly feel lost or unfulfilled, even if she enjoys a materially comfortable life. Deep down, she doesn't know where she's going, and she's afraid to stop and ask herself that question seriously. I once knew a woman who was intelligent and successful, but every time she faced a crisis, she blamed her circumstances, other people, or bad luck. I never saw her pause to ask, did I have a part in this? Am I living in a way that's out of sync with what I really want? Instead of sitting with herself, journaling, talking to someone she trusted, or seeking guidance to gain deeper clarity, she chose shopping. She overworked. She took short vacations to escape it all. But the issue never went away. It just went into hiding. Stoicism doesn't ask you to punish yourself. On the contrary, it invites you to look within with both clarity and compassion. To understand yourself, not to criticize, but to ask, what is holding me back? What beliefs are flawed? What patterns keep repeating themselves with no meaningful result? A wise woman knows to spend even just 10 minutes a day asking, did I act in alignment with my values today? Is there anything I regret? What did I learn from the discomfort I experienced? These small, consistent questions lead to a bigger, clearer life. The difference between someone who simply ages and someone who truly grows is the ability to reflect. A mature woman understands success, happiness, and peace all begin with transparency toward herself. No one else can give her the answer. All external guidance only works if there is inner space ready to receive it. A woman who lacks internal reflection often falls into repetitive cycles, falling for the same type of wrong man, choosing the wrong job again and again, reacting destructively in familiar scenarios, but continues to believe it's just fate. But fate does not repeat itself, only unconscious behavior does. So how do you step out of this blind spot? First, bravely accept the truth. I don't know everything about myself, and that's okay. Second, learn to sit in silence. Turn off your phone, do nothing, just breathe and listen. At first, it may feel uncomfortable, but if you persist, the answers will begin to emerge. They've always been there, waiting for you to have the patience to hear them. Lastly, don't be afraid of what you discover. No one is perfect, but everyone can grow. Every mistake, every dark corner, if illuminated, can become a lesson. And every woman, if she dares to look within, can become a deeper, stronger, and more radiant version of herself. Because clarity does not come from how much you know, but from whether you dare to see the truth. 7. She talks more than she listens. In a noisy world filled with social media, talk shows, live streams, and a constant flood of stories, there's a type of person becoming increasingly common, someone who cannot sit still and truly listen, but is always looking for the next chance to speak, not because they have something profound to share, but because they cannot bear silence. In Stoic philosophy, this is a clear sign of an undisciplined mind. Because a wise person doesn't need to speak often, they know that the right silence can be more powerful than the right words. A wise woman can remain composed in a conversation. She doesn't interrupt. She listens not only with her ears, but with her full presence. In contrast, a woman who talks excessively often does so to satisfy her ego, to affirm her existence. She will interrupt your story to insert her own, will cut you off to defend a viewpoint that may not even be well thought out. And sometimes she talks just to fill the void, because she's afraid of facing the truth within. Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." A seemingly simple phrase, but one rooted in deep philosophical wisdom. A woman who does not listen is denying herself the chance to learn, because every interruption is a missed opportunity to understand others and to understand herself. This kind of person is easy to recognize in conversations. She speaks the most but remembers the least. She asks questions not to hear answers, but to redirect the topic to her interests. She's not truly interested in what you're sharing. She's just waiting for her turn to talk again. She enjoys giving advice, even when no one asked. She reacts instead of empathizing. And the most alarming part, she makes others feel unseen, unheard, and misunderstood. A friend once told me that every time she met her best friend, it felt like attending a one-sided seminar. She would just sit there, nodding, while the other woman talked endlessly about her job, her love life, her family, without once asking, "And how about you?" After a few meetings, the relationship faded, not because of a fight, but because of a lack of real connection, which only happens when both people listen to each other. Listening is not a passive act. It requires attention, patience, and an ego humble enough not to dominate every conversation. In the workplace, a woman who doesn't listen can make colleagues feel dismissed. In romantic relationships, she can make her partner feel lonely even while sitting beside her. And in the family, she will struggle to become the kind of mother, daughter, or partner who fosters deep emotional connection. Stoicism does not deny the value of speech, but it elevates the value of silence before speech. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Be silent, unless what you had to say is better than silence." This doesn't mean you must be mute. It means every word should come from understanding, not from a need to be seen. A thoughtful woman understands this. She doesn't need to speak to impress. It is the empathy in her silence, the patience in her listening, and the subtlety in her responses that earn her respect. When she truly listens, she creates a safe space for others to be themselves, and that is one of the greatest spiritual gifts anyone can offer. What to start changing? Try this. In your next conversation, instead of responding immediately, pause for 3 seconds after the other person finishes. Feel, listen not just to their words, but to their tone, their emotions. Then respond, not to win, but to connect. You'll be surprised at how people begin to see you differently. You can also ask yourself, am I speaking just to fill silence? Do I listen to others the way I want to be listened to? These small questions, when asked regularly, can gradually reshape how you show up in your relationships. In a world increasingly drowned in virtual noise, the woman who truly listens, deeply listens, is the one who holds on to depth and humanity. Because wisdom doesn't come from how beautifully you speak, but from how attentively you hear. So if you want to be a strong, thoughtful, and respected woman, start by speaking a little less and listening a little more. In that quiet space, you'll not only understand others, but also come to understand yourself. In the end, what truly exhausts a mature man is not the pressure of work or the busyness of life, but a relationship that makes him question himself every single day. One where he's always on guard, weighing every word, every expression, every moment of silence, just to keep the peace. But that peace is actually prolonged endurance. After walking through the 7 signs, from prioritizing appearance over character, avoiding personal responsibility, being overly dependent on others' opinions, emotional instability, material obsession, lack of introspection, to talking more than listening, we cannot ignore a painful truth. There are women who, even without bad intentions, can become a toxic source of energy in the emotional life of the man beside them. And the danger lies here. That toxicity doesn't show up in shouting or physical harm. It arrives in the form of misplaced gentleness, disguised dependence labeled as love, or charm that lacks self-awareness. You may fall in love with a woman like this. You may feel chosen, needed, like you are her rock. But pause, just for a moment, and ask yourself, is this really love, or is it emotional dependency? Cleverly packaged, are you slowly becoming a version of yourself that merely endures, the very version you once swore you'd never be? Philosophers of Stoicism like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus emphasized one key insight. A wise life doesn't begin by trying to control the world, but by being mindful of what you allow into your own mind. So ask yourself, who are you allowing into your life? Who is shaping your thoughts, your emotions, your decisions, every day? And is that person helping you live more aligned with your calm, kind, and core self? Be honest, because sometimes What drains us most isn't how bad they are, but how long we've tried to stay, to understand, to empathize, to wait for them to change, until one day, we're no longer ourselves. But you know what? It's never too late to walk away. It's never too late to choose again. No need for drama, no need for yelling, just the quiet clarity to realize, I deserve peace, and peace cannot exist in a relationship that demands you to sacrifice your dignity, your time, and your spirit, just to maintain the illusion of stability. The sad truth is this: society teaches men how to make money, how to be strong, how to lead, but rarely does it teach them how to recognize a woman they should not stay with. Rarely does it encourage them to walk away, even when they know, deep down, that the woman beside them is not walking at the same level of consciousness. Because of that, many men stayed too long in relationships that shrink them, silence their inner voice, and pull them further away from their true selves. But you can be different. You can be the man who refuses to trade his values for a relationship that merely looks good. You can be the man who chooses clarity over chaos, truth over illusion, and wisdom over temporary emotion. Thought balloon. Ask yourself, is this relationship making me wiser? Am I becoming more at peace, more myself, or am I just trying to please a version that isn't real? Remember this: the right woman doesn't make you guess her feelings every day. She doesn't make you apologize for having a voice. She doesn't ask you to abandon your beliefs. She makes you feel heard, she helps you grow, and she allows you to live your truth without having to shrink yourself to stay in love. And if something in all of this struck a chord with you, then right finger, leave a comment and share your thoughts or story. Sometimes, speaking it out is the first step towards stepping out of a cycle. Right finger, subscribe to this channel for more profound reflections on psychology, wisdom, and how to become your most conscious self. Right finger. And if you know another man who needs to hear this message, send him this video. You might be the hand that pulls him out of a relationship he hasn't yet dared to call toxic. Thank you for walking this path with me. True maturity is not about enduring more. It's about knowing when to let go. And that is profound wisdom.